On behalf of the Professional Baseball Strength and Conditioning Coaches Society, I'd like to welcome you to the PBSCCS Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Messina. I'm here with Logan Byman of the Pittsburgh Pirates organization. Logan, thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate your time. Tell the listeners about yourself, if you would, please.
So real quick, went to NC State for undergrad, got into wrestling in high school, and that was how I got into the strength and conditioning field. My strength coach, or my wrestling coach, is actually from NC State. Still big parts of my growth as a coach. Lee Pritz, Carter Jordan, Steve Ansaravage, still talk to them, meet up with them, cool views from those guys about how to coach. Moved from there while I was wrestling, worked at a private facility, actually a CrossFit RDU in North Carolina under Steve Johnson. Learned a lot of the basics from him. Got going there for probably about 6 years. Went from there, interned with Exos in San Diego, worked under Victor Hall and Brent Calloway. Learned a great deal from those guys. Really kind of expanded my knowledge that I already had. From there, went to grad school at the University of Florida. Big influences there from Karen Worth, Paul Chandler, Jesse Ackerman, Matt Delancey. Again, just kind of kept growing my knowledge as a strength coach, implementing a little bit more and more every time. From there, went to the Pirates and worked with Joe Hughes, Brendan Huttman, Carlo Alvarez. Learned a lot from those guys as bosses, and now I'm still working for the Pirates, minor league strength coach.
I know a few of the names, and the names that I know are big-time coaches and big-time leaders and helping mentor and kind of influence. So I have an idea of where your influences lie and your thoughts and your beliefs just from some of those guys that I've been around. So that's a pretty good list. Were you doing strength and conditioning like in high school when you were wrestling too?
Yeah, so I had my first season wrestling in my junior year of high school. And I was very average. I think I finished like 15 and 16 or something like that for the season. I either got pinned or pinned them. There was no in between. And went to dinner at the end of the season with some buddies. Saw some guys sitting a couple tables away that had USA Wrestling shorts on. And we decided to go over and talk to them. And they owned a gym. And we went in, worked out a couple times, and one of the guys was like, hey, we have some youth athletes that come in. Would you have any interest in making a couple bucks an hour to train them? And the rest is history, I guess.
Yeah, so you started on the path really early then.
Yeah, didn't know. I went to college as an aerospace engineer for a year and a half, and then got an internship, didn't want to sit at a desk for a living, and realized strength and conditioning was the only other thing I knew how to do. So figured we'd give that a shot.
Yeah, I started as a chem engineering in my undergrad, but I didn't even make it to the intern thing. It was like one semester, and I was like, yeah, I can't do this. Even the thought of doing this is so, I mean, kind of like a big change in life from engineering for us to strength and conditioning, but it seems to be working out for us, I believe.
So far.
So one of the big reasons I had you on, other than because I know who you are and we're boys and I know where your influences lie and everything, but you were Strength Coach of the Year this past year in the Florida State League. I've had a good amount of coaches on here who were the Strength Coach of the Year, so the listeners are kind of aware that it is, peer voted on. And so first and foremost, congrats to you. But what is it that you're doing that makes you so successful in the eyes of others in that league?
Yeah, obviously I don't know exactly what it is. Everybody votes themselves and has their own opinions about everything. I think at the end of the day, it's doing, the things that you think it takes to be a really good strength coach really, really well. I think you care for your athletes. I like to pick guys' brains when they come through town, see what they're doing, see if they've heard anything new, kind of what stuff they're on, and get an idea of what they've learned recently. A really cool quote recently, just a little plug for him. Mike Boyle was at a conference and heard him speak, and he said the first, if he had, Strength Coach University, the first course on the first day, the first thing you'd learn is cheat off of anyone and everyone around you. So, just trying to learn what other people know, because at the end of the day, you can only read and hear so much yourself, and you can learn a lot from other guys. And, you like to think that you're setting an example of what a strength coach should be, and other guys see that.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that knowledge comes either from your own experience or from the experience of others. And for you to get it from others, you got to steal it. And it's kind of shameless, whatever, but there are people who are way smarter than us who have been doing it way longer that I want to learn from and steal their ideas to help me get better. And if that's the case, it's going to make your athletes better. Like, I don't see any problem with it. So,
at the end of the day, how are you going to expedite the process of experience? And if you can learn from other guys to shortcut some of the mistakes they've made, it's, puts you in a good spot.
Spin your wheels somewhere else instead of the same spot you've been spinning.
Find something else to mess up.
So with all the previous experience that you've had, you've been under some great mentors. How would you say those experiences have helped to mold you into the strength coach that you are today?
I've learned countless things from different people for sure. I know, like I said, at CrossFit RDU, I learned a lot of the basics. Steve, and then, one of his assistant coaches, Phil Farmer, that was there, if anybody's into powerlifting, IPF world champion, ranked number 1 in the world like 10 times, something like that. I learned just a lot of the basics, how to lift, how to adjust programs for people that are injured. CrossFit gets a big faux pas in the strength and conditioning world. I don't think there are many gyms that do it very well, but that to me was one of them. I learned a ton of great stuff from those guys. Moving to Exos, big focus on athletics for them. So how do you correlate weight room to athletics, which was, a big bridge, because before for me it had been powerlifting, Olympic lifting, and that's it. And at the end of the day, the athletes we work with don't want to be the best lifter. They want to be the best baseball player, or, whatever sport you're working with, it's really the same. How does what you're doing help them on the field? And if it doesn't, why are you doing it? So big impact there on just the way I thought about things. University of Florida, continued to grow a lot of knowledge. Matt Delancey is one of the best programmers I've ever met in my life. Absolutely outstanding. Paul and Karen and Jesse helped me a lot with kind of the implementation. They let me coach athletes and write programs, and you learn a lot trying to do it. It's one thing to watch great coaches put out great programs and coach great athletes, but when you try to do it, there's a lot of mistakes you make, and they let you know, and you learn from the process and get better. And then Pirates, obviously, Joe and Brendan, I think, do an awesome job of putting you in positions where you're having to do something you're not really good at, and as a byproduct, you become a much better coach. So it's a combination of all those. And then, recently I've just met Dan Paff, Stu McMillan at the Altus camp, like we were talking about earlier, and a wealth of knowledge from those guys, able to talk to them. Mike Boyle was there, was able to talk to him. Just some unreal thoughts and knowledge from those guys. And recently through Jeff Dillman, who I was with at the University of Florida as well, I got put in touch with Al Vermeil, who is, one of the legends in the strength and conditioning field. There aren't too many guys that have worked with the NFL, the NBA, and Major League Baseball. So that's quite a combo to be successful in all of those. And he's been a wealth of knowledge just about how to look at the big picture and just all the experiences he's gone through. So, I think there's so many things you pick up from so many different people, and then it's the combination of those that make you into the coach you are.
Yeah, right on. I am a big believer in periodized learning. I don't know if it's just a strength coach in me, but it kind of sounds like you took the basics first and then kind of transferring and then advanced programming and implementation. That's, in my mind, that's how somebody new to the field should kind of learn it. It shouldn't be okay, I'm here and I'm learning the most advanced topics when I don't even know how to teach squatting or hinging or whatever. So it seems like you took a good path, and it's led you to even more opportunities to learn elsewhere with new people. Joe has actually put me in situations where he already knew what I was going to do before I even did it. And And then he would ask me a question, be like, "Did you think about this?" Like, "No, I didn't." And he's like, "Of course you didn't, but I already knew it." Like, and I'm sure you know that just from being around him. But finding
Absolutely.
people like that helps you out so much, man. And sometimes we want to learn everything at once, but it's just taking progressive steps forward, and those steps lead us to other steps and new people that will help us with things that we don't know. And that's kind of how we learn and grow, at least in my mind anyways. I don't want to
Yeah.
learn the most advanced before I know the basics.
And
And
you got to learn it to me, and then be in a also in situations where you can apply it. Because I know for me, the learning process is great, but the implementation is always a little bit different. You think you know it, and you try to do it, and then all of a sudden you're like, I didn't know as well as I thought I did. So the combination of those two things is huge.
yeah, and that's with anything, like not just strength and conditioning. Like,
Yeah.
you can
So
read all the books on how to ride a bike, but if you've never been on the bike, all those books kind of go out the window a little bit. So in general, kind of what do you think makes a strength and conditioning coach successful, and then maybe specifically in pro ball?
and to start off the question, I think at the end of the day, the things that make you successful in pro ball are going to be the things that make you successful as a strength. I think they have to be synonymous. At the end of the day, as much as we like to think our sports are so different, they're relatively similar when you break them down. There will always be differences, but they're at the end of the day, a good strength coach is going to be a good strength coach anywhere. I think the basis of it for everyone is a little bit different. For me, kind of like we talked about earlier, you got to care about your athletes. I think that comes number one. Always looking to change what you're doing based off of their needs. Not necessarily their wants, but their needs. I think those are a little bit different a lot of times. I think you need to always be learning as a strength coach. If you think you've got it figured out and you've got the perfect program and everything, I mean, I think you're just wrong. You probably need to take a second look at that. There's always somebody that has been there longer, that knows more than you do. So always trying to learn from those guys and fill the holes that you have as a strength coach. Self-evaluation is really important. I think it's really hard, but we all have stuff we're not very good at. Figuring out what that stuff is and then attacking that stuff. Surrounding yourself with people that know things you don't know, I think is very important. If you're always sitting around with people that are telling you how smart you are and how you've got it all figured out and agree with everything you say, you probably need to broaden your circle or replace a few of those chairs with some other people that maybe challenge you a little bit. I think that's really important. And then one of the big ones I've learned recently, I've had to work on a lot is setting a standard of, this is what I expect every day in and out. And, the standard isn't something we meet most of the time. The standard is that's where you start from. That's the bottom line every day. This has to get done, period. And letting the athletes know what that is and holding them to your expectations.
That's all really, really good stuff, man. And it all does apply whether you're in baseball or not. I mean, there are the nuances of professional baseball. You got to adjust to the travel and the food and the this and the that. But at the same time, you probably have to do that in other sports. Just they're named football, soccer, basketball, whatever. You know what I mean? It's in the big picture, like you said, it is all kind of there. And standards are the same regardless of where you go, the people that you talk to. There's other strength coaches, other opportunities to learn. Your program might be great to you, but a guy might come in with something that he can't do on that program, and you have to adjust, and that's universal. So there's a ton of good stuff in there, and very, very good, very good. So what do you believe in within strength and conditioning that others think you are crazy for believing? You got a good smile on your face here, so I'm intrigued to hear the answer to this question.
Well, I'm sure there's several. I guess I need to ask people what I do more. That sounds insane. I know one of the big ones for me, just as a strength coach, kind of finding an area that I can add value. To me, speed is number one. At the end of the day, whatever sport you're in, it's the closest we get to actually field training athletes. We have them squat, we have them hinge. That stuff's all really important, and you can relate it back to, well, they do it in the sport in this sense. But at the end of the day, when you run and you have them run, whether it's conditioning or sprint mechanics, change of direction, they're actually literally going to do that on the field. Exactly. So I think that's critical, and I think it's something in strength and conditioning that doesn't get done. And when it does, it doesn't get done well enough. We like, we're strength and conditioning coaches. Well, what about speed?
Yeah, I can be there with you 100% on that one.
So to me, that's something that I learned. I think I got really lucky learning it from some of the guys that I worked under and being able to implement it under some of the other people that I worked for and play around with that. And it's still a subject that I'm trying to learn a lot on because there's not a lot about it in field sports. A lot of the people I'm having to learn from are track coaches and strength and conditioning coaches for track athletes because it hasn't been implemented as widely as it probably should. So that's definitely one for me. And then the other one I like a lot that I've been thinking about and wrestling with a lot, still haven't quite gotten to the implementation and how exactly it works, but I think unilateral is king at the end of the day. We're all strength coaches, how much we want to admit it or not. We're all a little bit meatheads. And this is again stealing a little bit from Mike Boyle, but he told me to cheat, so I think it's probably okay. We all got into it because we wanted to look like bodybuilders and lift like powerlifters, but our guys don't need to necessarily be either of those things. So how can we better train them? Sports unilateral. So how can we more utilize unilateral exercises to be more efficient?
Well, as well as I do, this past month was a lot of squatting
Yes.
in Squattober. And so first and foremost, some people might think you were crazy for doing Squattober. But no, after that month of squatting, man, like I sat down and I was like, I need to do some unilateral work in my program because it hasn't been there for the month. And then like I look back at my logs and like, it hasn't been there for a lot longer than a month. Like, don't try to kid yourself, you know what I mean? And like you said, we're all meatheads and we just want to squat big and deadlift big. But I do believe that like part of your own training is taking an idea, running with it for yourself, seeing if it works, and then being able to implement it somewhere else instead of just, hey, go do this. Well, you don't do that. Yeah, well, you don't say as I, or do as I, you know what I'm saying? Like just do whatever it is, and they don't believe you because you're over there in the corner just squatting the house and you're not doing any unilateral work, and they don't want to do it because that's the standard or the example you're setting.
So, strong believer in practice what you preach.
100%, man, 100%. Practice what you preach, and I mean, there's been times in the past where I've given somebody a program and I've done the same program a week ahead of them just to let them know, okay, hey, this is how you're going to feel next week when you do this. And then when they do it, they're like, seriously, this guy was right. This is exactly what I was going to feel. So the unilateral stuff, and I'll probably get back to you on this in a month when I'm like, man, I hate doing unilateral stuff. But it is really valuable, and there's plenty of people that stand by it and use it in their programs and believe it. And it's definitely a big part of the puzzle of transferring over to the field.
Definitely.
So, what advice do you have for others? Clearly, you're clicking at a pretty high level. You had a good year this year. You've had plenty of experience from others, and you've learned many things. What advice do you have for others, either that are getting into the field or have been around that just want to keep the sword sharp?
I mean, number one, I guess, would be cheat. Learn from as many people as you can, as much as you can. Be absolutely amazing at the basics. Be really, really good at the fundamentals and continue to get better at them. I think those are the two big ones. I think if you're really, really good at the basics and you continue to learn, I think you're going to be in a really good spot. Everybody's got their stuff to work on. Just make sure that you know what your stuff is and you're not just doing what some of it's fun, some of it's not. But at the end of the day, if you want to be the best, you gotta continue to work at all of those. So. And it's I wrestle with it too. There's some stuff I don't really like working on that I need to, and I need to learn more about different aspects of conditioning and some of that stuff. And to me, it's not the most interesting. It's not my favorite part of being a strength coach, but you athletes can't just be not conditioned. You have to have well-conditioned athletes. So it's something that I need to understand better and something I've been working on.
100%, man. And you just throw in the conditioning in your own program and experiment with stuff. And it sucks. Like, you're a strength coach. You don't want to run or condition or whatever, but that's the best way to do it, is to figure it out for yourself. Use yourself as kind of a test dummy or a lab rat or however you want to put it, and experiment on yourself. And if it works, good. And if not, you're the one that suffered, not the athletes you're working with. And but the basics will always be there, man. You can go explore other things, and then, like, I have my own stuff that, okay, I need to refresh on this before I go to this. Okay, but now I need to study this. Like, I don't want to, but I need to. So I'm right there with you on that one. All right, so really good advice there. And I kind of want to transition just a little bit, not too much, but where are you going for continuing ed? You mentioned briefly the Altus conference. Are there any other seminars you're attending, books you're reading, podcasts you're listening to? Where are you going for your own continuing ed?
Yeah, as far as my continuing ed goes, I know a lot of guys are big readers. I'm typically not. If I find a book that's really interesting, I'll get into it. I do better with the podcasts and the videos personally. So any advice in that realm, I guess, would be figure out what works for you and go for that. Altus, I think, the camp we talked about, I believe it's the apprentice coaches or coaching program, is absolutely outstanding. If you have the chance to get to it, absolutely have to do it. World Speed Summit for me is a big one. It's a bit of an online symposium kind of thing, I guess is the best way to describe it, but it's typically 45-minute to an hour and 15-minute interviews with experts in the strength and conditioning or speed field. And those, I mean, it's a piece of interest for me, so it's been really cool to be able to watch those. Great in season if you don't have the ability to kind of get out and go to stuff. Talk to coaches who are doing it well or have done it longer than you, I think, is probably the biggest one. Find guys that are better than you and talk to them. Podcast, the Performance Podcast, is probably my favorite podcast. And then there's a couple books I haven't gotten to yet. One of them, Rich Panarella, just co-authored a book that just came out. I actually can't remember the title of it off the top of my head, but it looks really interesting. He's a guy that, if you don't know that name, look him up. So I'm pretty excited to read his. I just got through that Altus camp, so I'm starting to figure out what I got to look into now to continue that education for myself.
Who does the Performance Podcast that you mentioned?
Coach Dose. There's two guys, Coach Dose and I can't remember who the other one is on there. I have to go back and look at it. I've heard it so many times, and I haven't paid any attention to who's on there. But that podcast for me, some of them get drawn out a little bit, and I kind of lose focus on them. But those have been really interesting. They're not too long, where you can get a lot of good information pretty quick. So they've been very interesting. I'd recommend checking that out.
Yeah, I haven't heard that one, so I'll have to check in on that one. I'm always looking for new podcasts. So I'll have to look into that one. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to do a little lightning round. I know you probably have to pack. You're flying tomorrow, I know. But I want to steal a little bit of your time for a lightning round. What do you got?
You got it. Let's do it.
All right. Who is your biggest influence in the field of strength and conditioning? You named a lot, so.
Biggest influence, I would say, probably came from. Man, that's tough because there's so many guys. I spent the most time with Steve Johnson at CrossFit RDU. That's probably been, time-wise, the biggest influence that I had. And then athletically, I would say the guys from Exos, Brent Calloway and Victor Hall, have made absolutely huge impressions on me, really changed the way I did almost everything in strength and conditioning. So I would say that those guys have made huge impacts, and they've also been part of my growth in strength and conditioning. Steve since 2011, and those guys, Victor and Brent, since 2013. So they've had long-standing impacts.
For sure. One piece of equipment to train with, what would it be?
Ooh, personally, it's got to be a barbell. And I think if you have an athlete, probably a dumbbell.
Yeah, I had you pegged as a barbell guy. Just squat tober isn't for guys that don't use barbells a lot. You pretty much don't have a choice. So I figured you were, at least for yourself, a barbell guy.
Yeah.
Biggest accomplishment professionally and or personally?
I mean, biggest accomplishment to this point was probably getting a full-time job in professional sports. That was still pretty proud of that one.
Yeah, it's weird. Like we spend every day with the guys, and it's like, okay, this is our job. It's like this is a this is a cool gig, man. It's like a big thing, and like it really means a lot. And you're helping a lot of people fulfill their childhood dreams. So it's a kick-ass job for sure. Last one. Any career other than strength and conditioning, what would you choose? It's not engineering, is it?
No, I don't think so. It'd be something with cars. I'm a little bit of a car nerd.
Really?
So something with either racing cars or owning like a tune-up shop or souping up Mustangs, big Mustang guy. So
cool.
Something like that.
I didn't know that, but that is interesting.
Yeah.
Well, my man, I appreciate your time. And, we'll be catching up soon about some other stuff. But if the listeners want to get in touch with you, where can we find more from you?
I'm on Facebook, Logan Byman, pretty straightforward. On Instagram, also Logan Byman. I'm not real creative in that sense. Feel free to email me, logan.byman@pirates.com. Again, not particularly creative, but that's pretty much it. I'm not on really a whole lot of platforms, I guess.
Nah, your Instagram is good, man. Every day I see the squat videos, I get fired up for mine.
There you go.
But appreciate your time, man, and we'll be talking soon.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me on.
All right, everybody, that concludes this episode with Logan. I hope you enjoyed this one. It was really good to hear his thoughts on both speed training and on unilateral training. 3 things that I took from Logan: surround yourself with people who know things that you don't, practice what you preach, and be amazing at the basics. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll talk to you again on the next one.